The air bit with the ferocity of a cornered wolf. January 1945. Across the snow-laden fields men huddled, ghosts barely distinguishable from the frozen landscape. They were American soldiers, bone-weary and perpetually cold, their breaths pluming white against the grey sky like desperate signals. For 2 weeks they had endured a relentless trial, encircled, outnumbered, assaulted again and again by an enemy determined to grind them into the very earth they defended outside the Belgian town Bastogne. The town itself, a nexus of crucial roads, was the prize. Its capture, the key to unlocking a larger, more terrifying strategy. Their resistance, therefore, was more than just survival. It was a linchpin in a desperate gamble, a bulwark against the encroaching darkness. Amongst them was Easy Company, a name that would, in time, echo through the annals of conflict, a brotherhood forged in fire, hardship, and the shared understanding of mortality. Men who had tasted the horrors of Normandy and the bitter failures of Operation Market Garden. Men who knew the stench of fear and the cold comfort of a foxhole. Men now faced with a renewed offensive, a chance to claw back the initiative and drive towards the heart of the weakening enemy. Today, the frozen ground beneath their boots would once more be stained crimson. Today, they would advance. The objective, a small village, a cluster of stone buildings huddled against the winter's wrath. Locally, it was known as Fua. To the men of Easy, shaped by the quirks of memory and mispronunciation, it was often referred to as Foy. Names, however, were inconsequential. What mattered was its strategic value, its position as a stepping stone towards the larger goal of reclaiming lost ground. To understand the present, one had to look back, to trace the path that led to this frozen moment, to the desperation that had gripped the enemy's high command in the waning days of 1944. The Eastern Front was a maelstrom, the Soviet juggernaut grinding relentlessly westward. In the west, the Allied armies tightened their grip on a shrinking territory. The situation was dire, and the enemy knew that time was running out, the desperate hope of one last decisive strike. Obsessed with maps, scrutinizing the lines of battle, one final gamble emerged, a thrust through the Ardennes, a region steeped in history, a natural fortress of dense forests and rolling hills. These very woods had witnessed the enemy's successes in previous conflicts, a weak point, a place where the Allies were thinly spread, and a chance to cause chaos. The Ardennes, a sector previously considered quiet, a place where weary divisions could recuperate. The 101st Airborne, seasoned veterans battered by months of relentless combat, found themselves stationed there, a welcome respite promised. Fate, however, had a cruel sense of humour. The illusion of peace was shattered in the pre-dawn hours of December 16th. A deafening barrage of artillery fire ripped through the silence, explosions tearing the earth apart and the sky filled with screaming rockets. The ground trembled beneath the treads of hundreds of tanks, followed by the endless march of an army, a wave of grey-clad soldiers emerging from the forest shadows. Operation Watch on the Rhine was underway, the enemy's final desperate throw of the dice, an attempt to sever Allied supply lines, capture Antwerp, and drive a wedge between the British and American forces. The plan was audacious, almost suicidal, yet the initial impact was undeniable. 25 enemy divisions smashed through the American lines, creating a gaping hole in the Allied defences. The response was immediate. Every available unit was thrown into the breach, the 101st Airborne included. Rushed to Bastogne, they dug in, reinforcing the town's defences. The town, with its vital road network, became the epicentre of the conflict. Over 22,000 men were soon surrounded, trapped, and subjected to a relentless siege. Amongst them, scattered across a thinly held line amidst the icy woods, were the men of Easy Company, the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment. Ordinary men thrust into extraordinary circumstances, men whose names would soon become synonymous with courage and sacrifice. Richard Dick Winters, no longer the company commander but the battalion executive officer, a leader from the very beginning. Since airborne training, Winters had guided Easy Company through the crucible of war. Normandy, where he spearheaded the assault on Breaker Manor, silencing German artillery positions. Operation Market Garden, where he led the charge against a deadly machine gun nest. Though now in a higher command position, his heart remained with the men of Easy Company, a bond forged in blood and shared experience. His presence, a quiet assurance, a reminder of what they had already overcome. Taking his place as company commander was First Lieutenant Norman Dyke. A veteran, despite the popular portrayal of incompetence, Dyke had earned his stripes in the field. A Bronze Star in the Netherlands, another waiting for him amidst the carnage around Bastonia. Now, it was his responsibility to lead Easy Company, to guide them through the fire. A weight of expectation, a burden of command, and a test of his mettle in the face of overwhelming odds. Supporting him was First Sergeant Carwood Lipton, a man who had risen through the ranks, from private to the pinnacle of the non-commissioned officer corps. A Bronze Star earned at Breaker Manor, a Purple Heart for wounds sustained at Carroran. Lipton, the steady hand, the voice of reason, the embodiment of resilience. His presence was a constant, a reassuring figure in the chaos of war. By his side was Staff Sergeant Darrell Shifty Powers, a quiet Virginian whose backwoods upbringing had honed his skills with a rifle. Shifty, a marksman, a hunter, a man whose instincts were as sharp as the blade of a knife. The skills, learned amidst the forests and hills of his youth, would prove invaluable. A steady hand on the trigger, an unerring eye on the target. By midday on December 21st, 1944, Easy Company, along with the rest of the 101st and a ragtag collection of support units, found themselves encircled, outnumbered 5-1. The enemy's goal, to seize the vital road network radiating from the town. The American perimeter was a makeshift defence, anti-aircraft guns pressed into service as anti-tank weapons, a small firefighting force acting as a reserve, medical supplies dwindling. The brutal Belgian winter compounded their misery. The men lacked proper winter gear, and the incessant fog and snow-grounded aerial resupply efforts. The enemy general, his confidence fueled by the encirclement, demanded surrender. A message crackled across the airwaves, a blunt ultimatum promising annihilation. The response from General McAuliffe, commander of the 101st Airborne, was succinct, defiant. Nuts! The gauntlet was thrown. The fight would continue. The American defense strategy was simple, a desperate improvisation dictated by necessity. The few armoured vehicles and artillery batteries were shifted from one hotspot to another, plugging holes in the line, repelling each attack. The 506th was positioned on the northern edge of the pocket, guarding a major road leading directly into Bastonia. Failure here meant collapse. Easy Company dug their foxholes in the Bois Jacques, a dense patch of woods, facing off against elements of the 2nd Panzer and 26th Folk Grenadier divisions. They dug in, they held on, they stopped the enemy's assaults. The days bled into one another, a constant cycle of shelling, skirmishes and bone-chilling cold. On the morning of December 23rd, a miracle occurred. The skies cleared. American supply planes arrived, a lifeline of ammunition, food, and desperately needed medical supplies dropped from the sky. A brief respite, a flicker of hope amidst the darkness. The week that followed was brutal. Enemy artillery rained down on Easy Company's positions. Sergeant Lipton had a close brush with death when a shell landed just feet away. A dud. The dense woods added to the confusion, a disorienting maze of trees and shadows. Even sweat became a danger, soaked clothing freezing solid against the skin, leading to frostbite and hypothermia. Despite the weather, despite the enemy, Easy Company held its ground, controlling the near side of the Bois Jacques, pushing back the enemy across the road. By early January it was clear that the enemy's offensive had stalled. The fierce resistance, the tenacity of the American defenders had broken their momentum. The 101st Airborne, now known as the Battered Bastards of Bastonia, had held the line, buying time for Patton's Third Army to break through the encirclement. The tide had turned. Now it was time to push forward, to drive towards the enemy's heartland. The question, where would Easy Company strike next? What was their objective? The focus now shifted to Fua, nestled along the N30 highway, a small village, but a critical link in the chain of enemy defences, a strategic village needed for higher ground. Fua centred around a crossroads, dominated by a small chapel, the Chapelle Saint-Bon. This small holy building watched over the coming battle. The woodline bordering the Route Madame was a natural staging ground for an assault. The forest extended closer to the village, a perfect starting point to launch an attack. Between the forest and the village stretched open farm fields blanketed in snow. The only cover, scattered haystacks, offering meagre protection against the withering fire. Easy Company had moved into positions along the woodline, preparing for the assault. 2nd Platoon, under Lieutenant Jack Foley, positioned to the left. 1st Platoon, with Lieutenant Dyke and Sergeant Lipton in the centre. 3rd Platoon, under Lieutenant Ed Shames, on the roadside. Winters, monitoring the attack from the woodline. G Company holding the far left flank. I Company in reserve. Mortars and machine gun positions supporting the assault. The plan was simple, a frontal assault. Easy Company, supported by I Company, would charge across the open fields, capturing the crossroads and clearing the village. 2nd Platoon would push along the left flank. 1st Platoon would attack directly down the centre. 3rd Platoon would cross the road, avoiding a minefield and roadblock, launching a diversionary attack on the right flank of the village. Facing them were the formidable forces of the 9th Panzer Division. 2 Tiger tanks, a Panzer IV and an 88mm anti-aircraft gun, backed by a company of Panzer Grenadiers. The 88mm gun, positioned behind the chapel, overlooking the N30 highway. The Panzer IV nestled in a defilade between the road and a nearby house, covering the main approach. German mortar observers and machine gunners stationed inside the house. A difficult task. The enemy attack required crossing 200 metres of open terrain, a suicidal proposition in the freezing cold and snowy conditions. Speed was essential. But after the siege of Bastonia, Easy Company wasn't thrilled. The company was severely depleted, filled with fresh replacements who lacked combat experience. The mood was tense, a mixture of fear, resignation, and grim determination. The platoon leaders were concerned, particularly about Dyke's ability to lead. His past failures haunted them, the fear that his indecisiveness would cost lives. Despite these reservations, at 8:30 a.m. on January 14, 1945, the men of Easy Company were ready. The foxholes dug into the frozen ground still bore witness to the men's time. The snowy silence was shattered by the sound of mortars, the signal to attack. 3rd Platoon, leading the diversion, moved along the side road towards the right side of the village. Engaged by enemy troops, the squad drew the defence. Simultaneously, 1st and 2nd Platoon launched their charge across the fields. The men dashed through the snow, the lines kept formation, but a good distance to travel. Suddenly the offensive stopped 75 yards from the town. Winters, watching from the woodline, saw the line stop and men huddle behind haystacks. No explanation from Dyke. They were sitting ducks. At first, only a few German riflemen fired back. The firing increased as the Americans advanced. The German sniper took the advances out one by one. Dyke had lost contact with Foley and 1st Platoon after taking a bullet in the shoulder. Facing growing enemy fire, he took cover behind a haystack, ordering his men to do the same. According to Lipton, he fell apart, unable to issue orders. Foley and 2nd Platoon were slowed down by enemy soldiers and fire from the village. Dyke, still in shock, didn't answer the radio. 1st Platoon, pinned in the fields, without cover, suffered. Dyke had then ordered 1st Platoon to flank left of the company. 1/3 of men shot in moments. Trapped in the field, the enemy picked off each soldier, with fire from rifles, artillery and mortars. Winters watched the entire scene unfold from the woodline. He had to act fast to save his company. His first thought was to charge out himself. He then realised that his position was best in command. He scanned the area for another to take control. Spears. Spears was standing in front of him. He said, "Spears, take over that company. Relieve the attack." The situation was ready for Spears. Spears, a name whispered with a mix of awe and fear. A reputation for bravery and ruthlessness. A bayonet charge in Normandy. Rumours. He was the leader demanded by the situation. Winters called. Spears rushed to join the attack. Spears ordered the unit to advance. Spears saw a private hiding behind a tree. "Come on, Webb, let's go. Get out, come on," ordered Spears. But there was no response. Spears dashes to the tree. The soldier was shot right in the eyes. Spears runs to Company 1 to coordinate the attack, as shown in the series. To reiterate, Company 2 moved to the left of the town and Company 3 to the right. There was a risk of fire between each division as they converged on each other. Spears had to contact Company 1 to stop a possible clash. He took off. While Spears dashed to Company 1, the series shows him running through the enemy lines. He did not. He ran along the American lines. Spears then crossed the N30 near a bus stop. He ran to update Company Y, and then back, while the battle raged around him. He saved lives and stopped the Americans from stalling. An 88 fired at Spears while he made his run. Spears had saved the attack. 3rd Platoon was fighting in the west. The Panzer at the centre was pinning Company Y. A sniper was stopping 3rd Platoon from advancing. Here we can see the village in winter. Company 3 fought to the secondary intersection, looking down the road. The German sniper was in a window to the building. He has an elevated vantage point down the street. Lipson and Shifty found cover on the corner, as they saw the accuracy from the sniper. Shifty, the best shot, would put his skills to the test. Shifty knew where to shoot because he saw the sniper's breath. Lipton created a window for Shifty to take the shot. Lipton said, "Don't miss Shifty." Lipson created the opportunity by drawing the sniper's fire to himself. Powers took the shot. Shifty's shot allowed the platoon to advance. The platoon just needed to contact with Americans coming from the other side. The Panzer IV pinned Company Wim in the offensive. An easy company member limped his way forward with a bazooka. The soldier fired, hitting the tank and knocking out its internal power. Seeing their own men die, the tank crew retreated. The battle ended after 3 hours. More than 100 enemy soldiers were captured. Easy Company suffered 82 causalities and 15 dead. The battle wasn't the end of the war. The troops pushed into Germany. By the war's end, the men occupied Hitler's home. 2,000